There are 6 types of people silently destroying your mental energy right now. And you probably think at least 3 of them are helping you. The invisible manipulator who makes you question your own reality. The chronic victim who drains you while playing helpless. The energy vampire disguised as your closest friend. The hidden critic who destroys your confidence with concern. The passive-aggressive saboteur who promises everything and delivers chaos. The emotional mirror who infects you with their negativity. Here's what behavioral psychology discovered. The most dangerous people in your life never announce themselves as threats. They operate through repetition, not confrontation. Through whispers, not screams. Through patterns so subtle, you mistake them for normal human behavior. That persistent fatigue you can't explain. That anxiety that follows certain conversations. That feeling of walking on eggshells around people who care about you. That's not you being sensitive. That's your nervous system screaming warnings about toxic patterns you've been conditioned to ignore. Most of us normalize emotional destruction because we confuse it with caring. We mistake boundary violations for intimacy. We think exhaustion after helping someone means we're good people. We've been programmed to believe that if someone isn't physically harming us, they can't be truly dangerous. But here's the brutal truth. Every time you ignore that quiet voice saying something isn't right, you're sending an invitation to toxic patterns. You're teaching manipulative behaviors that they're welcome in your life. You're rewiring your own brain to accept less than you deserve. The cost isn't just your peace of mind, it's your potential, your progress, your ability to build the life you actually want. Because when your mental energy is constantly being drained by invisible leeches, you have nothing left for your own transformation. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to expose these 6 psychological predators with surgical precision. You'll learn exactly how they operate, why they're so effective, and most importantly, how to identify and neutralize them before they completely rewire your reality. Warning. Once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. You'll start recognizing them everywhere. In your family, your workplace, maybe even in your closest relationships. Some of you will realize you've been living with these toxic patterns for years, decades even, thinking it was normal. Are you ready to see the invisible chains that have been holding you back? Let's begin. Before we dive into the 6 types, you need to understand how psychological manipulation actually works in the real world. Forget everything you've seen in movies about obvious villains and dramatic confrontations. Real, emotional predators are masters of subtlety. They operate through what behavioral psychology calls microaggressions. Tiny, seemingly insignificant actions that accumulate over time like drops of poison in your mental well. A dismissive tone here. A guilt trip there. A boundary crossed so gently you barely notice. Each incident is small enough to rationalize, but together they create a pattern of psychological erosion. The human brain is wired to adapt to consistent patterns, even harmful ones. It's a survival mechanism that helped our ancestors survive in dangerous environments. But in modern relationships, this same mechanism becomes a trap. Your nervous system gradually adjusts to higher and higher levels of stress, dysfunction, and emotional chaos until what should feel alarming starts feeling normal. This is why the most dangerous people in your life often feel familiar. They remind you of patterns you learned in childhood, dynamics you witnessed growing up, or relationships you've normalized over years of conditioning. Your brain recognizes the pattern and thinks, oh, this is just how relationships work. But here's what your brain doesn't understand. Familiarity is not the same as healthy. Just because something feels normal doesn't mean it's serving your highest good. Just because you can tolerate something doesn't mean you should. The 6 types I'm about to reveal have mastered the art of making their toxicity feel like care. Their manipulation feel like help. Their control feel like love. They've learned to exploit your deepest psychological needs, your need for belonging, validation, security, and connection, to keep you trapped in patterns that serve them while slowly destroying you. Each of these types represents a different strategy for psychological control. Some use guilt, others use confusion. Some make you feel special while secretly undermining your confidence. Others make you feel responsible for their emotional well-being while never taking responsibility for yours. What makes them so dangerous is that they often genuinely believe they're helping you. They've rationalized their behavior so completely that they can pass any lie detector test about their intentions. This makes them incredibly convincing and makes you doubt your own perceptions when something feels wrong. The key to protecting yourself isn't just recognizing these patterns. It's understanding why you're vulnerable to them in the first place. What needs are they pretending to meet? What fears are they exploiting? What childhood wounds are they poking at? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't attract these people by accident. We attract them because something in our psychological makeup makes us susceptible to their particular brand of manipulation. Understanding this isn't about blaming yourself. It's about empowering yourself to break the cycle. Now, let's meet the 6 most dangerous people in your life. Type 1. The invisible manipulator. They never raise their voice. They never make direct demands. They never explicitly threaten you. Yet somehow, you find yourself constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid their displeasure. The invisible manipulator is perhaps the most sophisticated of all psychological predators. They've mastered the art of control through suggestion, implication, and emotional conditioning. Instead of telling you what to do, they create an environment where you naturally gravitate toward the choices they want you to make. Here's how they operate. They use what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that makes gambling addictive. Sometimes they're warm and approving. Sometimes they're cold and distant. You never know which version you're going to get, so you become hypervigilant, constantly trying to figure out what will earn their approval. They plant seeds of doubt with seemingly innocent questions. Are you sure that's a good idea? Don't you think you're being a little selfish? I just worry that you're making a mistake. Each question is designed to make you second-guess yourself while positioning them as the voice of reason and concern. The invisible manipulator excels at rewriting history. Conversations that left you feeling confused or upset somehow become your fault in retrospect. They have an uncanny ability to make you feel like you're overreacting, being too sensitive, or misremembering what actually happened. They use your own values against you. If you value kindness, they'll make you feel cruel for setting boundaries. If you value loyalty, they'll make you feel disloyal for questioning their behavior. If you value growth, they'll convince you that their criticism is helping you improve. The most insidious part? They often target your biggest insecurities with laser precision. They seem to have a sixth sense for your deepest fears and vulnerabilities, and they know exactly how to poke at them in ways that feel like accidents or coincidences. You might notice that after spending time with an invisible manipulator, you feel emotionally drained but can't pinpoint why. Nothing dramatic happened. No obvious lines were crossed. Yet you feel smaller, more confused, less confident in your own judgment. Red flags to watch for. You find yourself constantly explaining or justifying your decisions to them. You feel like you're walking on eggshells around them. They have a way of making their problems become your emergencies. You often leave conversations with them feeling confused about what actually happened. They remember conversations very differently than you do. You find yourself changing your behavior to avoid their subtle disapproval. The antidote: trust your emotional responses over their explanations. If you consistently feel drained, confused, or diminished after interacting with someone, that's data worth paying attention to, regardless of how reasonable they seem on the surface. Start documenting patterns. Write down how you feel after interactions with them. Notice the subtle ways they redirect conversations, deflect responsibility, or make you question your own perceptions. Most importantly, stop trying to get them to validate your reality. Invisible manipulators are masters at making you doubt yourself. The more you seek their confirmation that something is wrong, the more ammunition you give them to convince you that you're the problem. Type 2. The chronic victim. Everything happens to them. Nothing is ever their fault. And somehow, their constant crises always become your responsibility to solve. The chronic victim has weaponized helplessness. They've discovered that by positioning themselves as perpetually powerless, they can manipulate others into taking responsibility for their emotions, their problems, and their life outcomes. It's manipulation disguised as vulnerability. Here's their strategy. They create a narrative where they are always the innocent party being wronged by circumstances, other people, or life itself. Every setback is a catastrophe. Every inconvenience is an injustice. Every challenge is proof that the world is against them. But here's the crucial distinction. Genuine victims seek solutions and take responsibility for their healing. Chronic victims seek sympathy and avoid responsibility at all costs. They have an endless supply of stories about how others have wronged them. But if you listen carefully, you'll notice they never examine their own role in these patterns. They never ask, "What could I have done differently?" Or "How can I prevent this from happening again?" The chronic victim uses guilt as their primary weapon. They make you feel selfish for having boundaries, cruel for not dropping everything to help them, and heartless for suggesting they might have some agency in their situation. They're masters at timing. Their crises always seem to happen when you're focused on your own goals, celebrating your own successes, or trying to establish healthy boundaries. It's as if they have a radar for when your attention is directed away from them. What makes this pattern so toxic is that it trains you to suppress your own needs and emotions. You learn that your problems are less important than theirs, your successes are less worthy of attention, your boundaries are less valid than their emergencies. Over time, you may find yourself becoming resentful, but then feeling guilty about that resentment because they can't help it and they're going through so much. This guilt keeps you trapped in the cycle of enabling their learned helplessness. Red flags to watch for. They have a new crisis every time you try to focus on your own life. They ask for advice but reject every solution you offer. They've been dealing with the same problems for years without making any real changes. They make you feel guilty for having good things happen in your life. They drain your energy with constant complaints but never take action. They position themselves as uniquely unlucky or targeted by life. The antidote. Distinguish between supporting someone through temporary difficulties and enabling chronic dysfunction. Healthy support has boundaries and expectations of reciprocity and growth. Start offering solutions instead of just sympathy. Notice how they respond. Genuine people in crisis will appreciate practical help. Chronic victims will reject solutions and continue seeking emotional validation. Set clear boundaries around crisis management. You can care about someone without making their emergencies your emergencies. You can offer support without sacrificing your own well-being on the altar of their perpetual victimhood. Type 3. The energy vampire. They don't just drain your energy, they feed on it. And they've become so skilled at the process that you might not even realize it's happening until you're completely depleted. The energy vampire is different from other toxic types because their primary goal isn't control or manipulation. It's consumption. They have an insatiable need for attention, validation, and emotional energy, and they've learned to extract it from others rather than generating it themselves. Here's how they operate. They create artificial intimacy through oversharing, constant contact, and manufactured urgency. They make you feel special and needed by positioning you as their primary source of emotional support, advice, and validation. But the relationship is fundamentally parasitic. They take and take and take, while giving back just enough to keep you invested. They're masters at making you feel like you're their lifeline, their only true friend, the only person who really understands them. The energy vampire has no concept of emotional reciprocity. They'll spend hours telling you about their problems, their feelings, their drama, but the moment you need support, they're suddenly busy, distracted, or they turn the conversation back to themselves. They're also masters of manufactured urgency. Everything is a crisis that needs immediate attention. Every emotion is intense and requires your immediate response. They create a sense that if you don't drop everything to attend to their needs, something terrible will happen. What makes this particularly insidious is that they often target people with strong empathetic abilities and helper tendencies. They can sense who will feel guilty for setting boundaries, who will prioritize others' needs over their own, who will mistake emotional exhaustion for deep connection. Over time, you may notice that your own emotional well-being starts to revolve around theirs. When they're up, you feel relieved. When they're down, you feel responsible. Your emotional state becomes dependent on managing theirs. Red flags to watch for. You feel emotionally exhausted after spending time with them. They contact you constantly, with urgent emotional needs. Conversations are always about them and their problems. They make you feel guilty for not being available 24/7. They have emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to the situation. You find yourself avoiding their calls or messages. They seem to have no other sources of emotional support. The antidote. Recognize that healthy relationships involve mutual energy exchange. You should feel energized and supported by your close relationships, not constantly drained. Start setting boundaries around availability. You don't need to be someone's on-call therapist. It's okay to say, "I care about you, but I'm not available to talk right now." Notice the difference between someone going through a temporary crisis and someone who seems to live in perpetual emotional chaos. Temporary crises have beginnings, middles, and ends. Chronic emotional chaos is a lifestyle choice. Most importantly, stop feeling responsible for other people's emotional regulation. You can care about someone without making their feelings your responsibility to manage. Type 4. The hidden critic. They never give you a direct compliment, but they're always ready with constructive feedback. They claim to want the best for you, but somehow their help always leaves you feeling smaller. The hidden critic has mastered the art of destruction through 1,000 tiny cuts. They don't attack you directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, they chip away at your confidence through backhanded compliments, subtle put-downs, and helpful observations about your flaws. Their weapon of choice is plausible deniability. Everything they say can be defended as caring, helpful, or just being honest. When you react negatively to their criticism, they can always claim you're being too sensitive or that you're misinterpreting their good intentions. They have an uncanny ability to find the one flaw in any success you achieve. Got a promotion? They'll point out how much more responsibility you'll have. Lost weight? They'll worry that you're getting too thin. Bought a house? They'll focus on the mortgage payments you'll be making for the next 30 years. The hidden critic operates through what psychologists call intermittent punishment. Just when you start to feel good about yourself or your achievements, they deliver a perfectly timed dose of criticism disguised as concern. This keeps you in a constant state of self-doubt and seeking their approval. They're masters at making you feel like you need their perspective to make good decisions. They position themselves as the voice of reason, the one person who will tell you the truth that everyone else is too nice to share. What makes this pattern so destructive is that it slowly erodes your confidence in your own judgment. You start second-guessing your decisions, downplaying your achievements, and seeking external validation for choices you should be making independently. Over time, you may find yourself preemptively defending your choices to them, or worse, making decisions based on what you think will avoid their criticism, rather than what's actually best for you. Red flags to watch for. They rarely give you genuine compliments without qualifications. They always find something to criticize in your successes. They position their criticism as just being honest or looking out for you. You find yourself seeking their approval before making decisions. They make you feel like you need their perspective to see situations clearly. You feel defensive or diminished after conversations with them. They seem to enjoy pointing out your mistakes or shortcomings. The antidote. Recognize that genuine support celebrates your successes and helps you build confidence, not tear it down. People who truly care about you want to see you thrive, not constantly question yourself. Start tracking the ratio of positive to negative feedback you receive from this person. Healthy relationships should have far more positive interactions than negative ones. Learn to distinguish between constructive feedback and destructive criticism. Constructive feedback is specific, actionable, and delivered with genuine care for your well-being. Destructive criticism is vague, demoralizing, and seems designed to make you doubt yourself. Most importantly, stop seeking validation from people who have a pattern of withholding it. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's approval, especially someone who seems invested in keeping you small. Type 5. The passive-aggressive saboteur. They say yes but mean maybe. They promise everything and deliver chaos. They never confront you directly, but somehow your plans always fall apart when they're involved. The passive-aggressive saboteur has turned indirect resistance into an art form. They've learned that they can control situations and punish people without ever having to take responsibility for their actions. They operate through omission, delay, and subtle sabotage. Here's their strategy. Instead of expressing disagreement or setting boundaries directly, they agree to things they have no intention of following through on. They make commitments they don't keep, promises they don't honor, and agreements they quietly undermine. They're masters of the non-apology apology. When confronted about their behavior, they'll say things like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "I didn't mean for it to come across like that." They take no actual responsibility while making you feel like you're overreacting. The passive-aggressive saboteur uses confusion as their primary weapon. They make you question what was actually agreed upon, what was actually said, what was actually promised. They operate in the gray areas where accountability becomes murky. They have an endless supply of excuses for why things didn't work out as planned. They were too busy. They forgot. They misunderstood. Something came up. Each excuse is plausible on its own, but the pattern reveals the truth. They're sabotaging through incompetence. What makes this pattern so maddening is that you can never quite pin down what's happening. Each individual incident can be explained away, but collectively they create an atmosphere of unreliability and frustration that slowly drives you crazy. You may find yourself becoming the bad guy for getting upset about their behavior, because on the surface, they never did anything obviously wrong. They just didn't follow through. Again, red flags to watch for. They agree to things, but rarely follow through completely. They have elaborate excuses for why things didn't work out as planned. They make you feel like you're being unreasonable for expecting reliability. They forget important commitments or conversations. They do things halfway or incorrectly, requiring you to fix or redo them. They seem to misunderstand instructions in ways that create more work for you. You find yourself walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their resistance. The antidote. Stop accepting excuses and start focusing on patterns. One missed commitment is an accident. A pattern of missed commitments is a choice. Set clear expectations and consequences. Don't just hope they'll follow through. Create systems that don't depend on their reliability. Learn to recognize passive-aggressive behavior for what it is, a form of control and punishment. Don't let them make you feel unreasonable for expecting basic follow-through and accountability. Most importantly, stop trying to manage their resistance. You can't force someone to be reliable or accountable. You can only decide how much unreliability you're willing to tolerate in your life. Type 6. The emotional mirror. They don't create their own emotional weather. They reflect yours back to you, amplified and distorted. Spend time with them, and you'll walk away carrying emotions that aren't even yours. The emotional mirror is perhaps the most subtle of all toxic types because they don't seem to be doing anything actively harmful. They're not manipulating, criticizing, or sabotaging. They're just absorbing and reflecting the emotional energy around them in ways that create chaos and confusion. Here's how they operate. They have no emotional regulation skills of their own, so they unconsciously absorb the emotions of everyone around them. But instead of processing these emotions healthily, they amplify them and broadcast them back into the environment. If you're stressed, they become anxious. If you're excited, they become manic. If you're sad, they become depressed. But here's the crucial part. They don't just mirror your emotions. They intensify them and then reflect them back to you, creating an emotional feedback loop that spirals out of control. The emotional mirror lacks emotional boundaries. They can't distinguish between their feelings and yours, between their problems and yours, between their reactions and yours. Everything becomes a shared emotional experience, whether you want it to be or not. They're also masters of emotional contagion. Their unregulated emotions are so intense and persistent that they gradually infect everyone around them. You might notice that your own emotional state becomes unstable when you're around them, even when nothing in your own life has changed. What makes this pattern so exhausting is that you never get to just feel your own feelings. Every emotion becomes a group project. Every mood becomes a shared experience. You lose the ability to process your own emotional experiences independently. Over time, you may find that your emotional well-being becomes dependent on managing theirs. You start avoiding certain topics, suppressing certain feelings, or managing your own emotional expression to prevent triggering their emotional chaos. Red flags to watch for. Your emotional state becomes unstable when you're around them. They seem to absorb and amplify whatever energy is in the room. They can't seem to regulate their own emotions independently. You find yourself managing your emotional expression around them. They make everything about shared emotional experiences. You feel emotionally exhausted after spending time with them. They seem to have no emotional boundaries or sense of emotional ownership. The antidote. Learn to distinguish between empathy and emotional absorption. Healthy empathy allows you to understand others' feelings without taking them on as your own. Practice emotional boundaries. You can care about someone's emotional experience without making it your responsibility to manage or fix. Recognize that some people are emotional black holes. They absorb energy without generating any of their own. You don't have to be someone's emotional regulation system. Most importantly, protect your own emotional well-being. You can't help someone develop emotional regulation skills by sacrificing your own emotional stability. The micro-actions that change everything. Transformation doesn't require dramatic confrontations or life overhauls. It happens through small, consistent actions that gradually shift the dynamics of your relationships and your life. Here are the specific micro-actions that will protect you from these 6 toxic types. Daily emotional check-ins. After every significant interaction, ask yourself, how do I feel right now? Energized or drained? Clear or confused? Confident or diminished? Trust these emotional responses as data about the health of your relationships. The 24-hour rule. When someone makes a request that feels overwhelming or inappropriate, give yourself 24 hours before responding. This breaks the pattern of automatic compliance and gives you space to consider what you actually want to do. Boundary statements. Practice using clear, direct language. I'm not available for that. I need time to think about this. That doesn't work for me. You don't need to justify, explain, or apologize for having boundaries. The broken record technique. When someone tries to argue with your boundaries, simply repeat your position without elaborating. As I said, that doesn't work for me. Don't get drawn into debates about the validity of your limits. Energy auditing. Regularly assess which relationships and activities energize you versus which ones drain you. Make conscious choices to invest more time and energy in the relationships that support your well-being. Reality testing. When someone makes you question your perceptions, write down what actually happened as soon as possible. Compare your written account to their version of events. Trust your documentation over their reinterpretation, the gray rock method. With manipulative people, become as uninteresting as possible. Give short, factual responses. Don't share personal information or emotional reactions. Make yourself a boring target. Consequence implementation. When someone violates your boundaries, follow through with natural consequences. If they're unreliable, stop depending on them. If they're critical, limit your sharing. If they're draining, reduce your availability. Support network diversification. Don't put all your emotional eggs in one basket. Cultivate multiple sources of support so you're not dependent on any single relationship for your emotional well-being. Self-validation practice. Learn to validate your own experiences and emotions instead of seeking external confirmation. Your feelings are valid simply because you're having them. These micro-actions work because they address the root psychological dynamics that make toxic relationships possible. They help you develop internal security, clear boundaries, and the ability to choose relationships based on how they actually serve your well-being. Remember, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Healthy relationships should add to your life, not subtract from it. This is your reminder that you deserve better. You deserve relationships that celebrate your growth, respect your boundaries, and support your dreams. Protect your energy. Trust your instincts. Choose your relationships wisely. The life you want is waiting on the other side of the boundaries you're afraid to set.